Hi guys, and welcome to the CPFC podcast with me, your host, Afonso Greenbrook. Today in Pod 19 Part 2, I'll be looking at a result over Manchester United in the FA Cup final at Wembley, and we'll be discussing the match, player rankings, my man of match, as well as hearing from Pardew and a few players on what they had to say after the game. So let's begin.
When I was in a boy, my father said to me, next to the name of son, you're CPFC. Hey, we are, you know us by the noise, the pride of Southampton and the famous Palace boys. Ho, 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 when I was in a boy, my father said to me, next to the name of son, you're CPFC. Hey, we are, you know us by the noise, the pride of Southampton and the famous Palace boys. Ho, 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 when I was in a boy, my father said to me, next to the name of son, you're CPFC. Hey, we are, you know us by the noise, the pride of Southampton and the famous Palace boys. Ho, 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 when I was in a boy, my father said to me, next to the name of son, you're CPFC. Hey, we are, you know us by the noise, the pride of Southampton and the famous Palace boys. Ho, ho, when I was in a boy, my father said to me, next to the name of son, you're CPFC. Hey, we are, you know us by the noise, the pride of Southampton and the famous Palace boys.
It was heartbreak again for Crystal Palace in the FA Cup final as 10-man Manchester United came behind to win 2-1 after extra time thanks to substitute Jesse Lingard's winner in the second half of the additional period. The final whistle saw the Palace players fall to the ground in emotional and physical exhaustion after giving it their all over 120 minutes as Alan Pardew suffered an FA Cup final loss for the third time. Much had been said before the game about the similarities between this and the Eagles' only previous appearance in the final back in 1990 against Manchester United, and it was brought to 2016 with Steve Coppell and Sir Alex Ferguson, managers of both teams 26 years ago, bringing the famous old trophy onto the pitch for the opening ceremony. After Prince William was introduced to the teams, and then the traditional Abide By Me and national anthem were sung heartily by those inside. Pardew had made 6 changes to the starting 11 who faced Southampton in their final league game last weekend. Julian Speroni, Adrian Mariappa, Jason Puncheon, Dwight Gale and Emmanuel Adebayor all dropped to the bench, with Wayne Hennessy, Johan Cabaye, Wilfried Zaha, Yannick Bolasie and Connor Wickham coming back into the squad and start, with Scott Dan promoted back to the first team after being on the bench on the south coast. Jordan Much, who started against the Saints, was also left out of the squad. Mile Jednak, ahead of linking up with Australia's next week as they prepare to face England, will have the honour of captaining the Eagles in their second ever FA Cup final appearance. With Sellers' own PA, Michael Ranke, whipping up the boisterous Palace fans, and the Doc Brown glad all over playing loudly, the neutrals watching were left in no doubt who were the winners of the fans were, and the special double display from the Honesdale fanatics was an impressive statement. Palace certainly turned up to win, with Yannick Bolasie forcing David De Gea in the United goal to gather on his line from a Johan Cabaye corner in the 4th minute. A minute later, Wayne Hennessy had an early chance to settle any cup final nerves, gathering a deflection from United's first corner. The first 15 minutes saw Palace weather a dominant Manchester storm as the Reds already had a corner free in the 7th minute. Louis van Gaal's side were finding a way in behind the Palace defence on the left, and that was left for Rashford, and Antonio Valencia gave Papa Suarez and Yannick Bolasie a horrid time. After 10 minutes, Rashford got through on goal, but a last-gasp covering tackle from Suarez deflected the ball off for a corner. Palace's first real chance came in the 17th minute, and it should have been a goal, as a cluttered pass from Damien Delaney in the middle of the park played in Wickham, who referee Mark Klangberg thought had been fouled by Chris Smalling, but put the big forward but the big forward got up, rounded Daniel Blind, and slotted past a prone De Gea in the United goal. However, Clattenburg had already belted down for Smalling's alleged infringement, showing him a yellow card, and the play was called back, much to the disbelief of Alan Pardew and the Crystal Palace fans. Palace responded immediately to their disappointment, as from the resulting Cabaye free kick, a Balassi header was tipped over by De Gea. Juan Mata was causing problems for the Palace defence as again he sneaked into the box, and despite a saving tackle from Balassi, the resulting loose ball flicked up into Suarez and Hennessy had to make a save. The Eagles were also slowly coming into the game, and with Mile Jednak keeping the dangerous Fellaini at bay, they gradually ventured up the field. Wilfried Zaha, playing against his former club, turned Anthony Martial on the halfway line and was nearly away, but was pulled back and given to a talking to by Clattenburg. United again came close in the 33rd minute as Rashford picked out Martial, but his goalward shot was blocked by Joe Ward. Zaha again got free of the last United man and was dispossessed by Blind at right back, but could not quite upright and pull the trigger, and a saving tackle from Wayne Rooney saved the day. Just before the half-time break, again, Clattenburg called the play back instead of allowing advantages, as Suarez got free of Mata in United territory, but the attacker was stopped and the Spanish player was booked. Shooting towards the Palace end in the second half, Balassi was quickly in amongst the chances after two long throws from Connor Wickham in the 49th minute, but as he went to shoot, he slipped. United then came the closest as they could as a Rashford flick found Fellaini on the edge of the box, and his first-time shot beat Hennessy but hit the post and rebounded back into play in the 53rd minute. It was then Palace's chance to come close, as 3 minutes later, Jednak found himself at the back of a Cabaye free kick, but he could not compose himself quick enough and shot over. A Delaney tackle from Rojo caused the Argentinian to be replaced by Mathieu Darmian, and then Rashford was forced off the field due to injury after accidentally colliding with a Palace player. He was replaced by Ashley Young in the 72nd minute. Pardew also brought on his first sub, as Johan Cabaye was replaced by Jason Puncheon, and the impact was nearly immediate, as just 7 minutes after his introduction, a Palace corner was cleared by United and then hooked back into the area. Puncheon found himself in space and onside, and he wasted no time in smashing the ball into the net past De Gea to make it 1-0. But it was to be short-lived for Palace, as just after 120 seconds later, Rooney was allowed too much space in the Palace half, and after playing it into Fellaini and into the Palace box, the big Belgian chested it to Mata, whose powerful shot could not be stopped by Ward, and the Palace line the game end the game as it was all even at 1-1. Connor Wickham was replaced by Dwight Gale, and Scott Dan, injured after a Palace attacking corner, was replaced by Adrian Mariappa for a rare appearance. Just 3 minutes from the end of normal time, Zaha could not connect with a Suarez cross, and the Palace faithful crossed their fingers for extra time. As the clock hit 90, Lingard came out on for Mata as the teams played out the 5 minutes additional time. After a short break to gather liquids and nerves, Zaha found himself through on goal from a Balassi flick, but United defence crowned him out. Lingard came close, then Fellaini was shown a yellow card for a foul on Jednak in the 101st minute. Both teams were physically exhausted, and you could be forgiven for thinking that they would both take extra time if it was offered to them. The resulting free kick from Fellaini's foul saw De Gea deny Palace again, and Balassi and the Spanish shot stopper pushed away the DR Congo winger's low shot. As the first half of additional time came to an end, Smalling was shown a second yellow card and subsequently red as he rugby tackled Balassi on the halfway line as the forward threatened to get away. Kicking towards the CPFC faithful again, Palace dared to dream again of FA Cup glory, and when Gale was played through by Zaha in the 107th minute, his toe poke was not good enough to beat De Gea, who saved again. The Palace forward turned away in disappointment as what was to be the side's last chance of the game. With just 10 minutes of the match remaining, Lingard scored with an expert half volley after Damien Delaney had cleared the ball, particularly from a dangerous United cross. The team of the red side of Manchester has defeated Palace again in the FA Cup, and despite some half chances and shots flashed wide in the final minutes, the Eagles could not put to bed the memories of 1990. The FA Cup run has been an emotional rollercoaster for all involved at the final whistle. Wembley was ringing out the red and blue half of the stadium, who looked forward to making it third time lucky. So now to move on to the player rankings, and you know what? Before we do start with this, I am going to give you a sort of little insight into the game. And if you obviously, this is part 2 of the podcast, so if you have listened to part 1, you've probably heard my opinion on what I thought about the game. Obviously, most of it was a rant about Clattenburg and his performance, but towards the end, I did sort of discuss the performance as a whole. And to be honest, considering we did lose this game, we did actually play quite well, and we looked like the Palace of old, the Palace of the first half of the season, and that's what we've wanted lately. And that was a full fit squad at Wembley, and you could see that we performed well. And yes, United were the better team by far, and I'm going to stand up and say that, but I don't think they deserved to win it because they had so many decisions that went their way. Sometimes you may think because the better team should always win, but in this case, they performed better, but then we didn't perform the same standard as them. We still performed well, but not up to their standard. But we had so many decisions go against us. And if you do want to hear more about them, do go watch part 1 of the podcast so you can hear my opinion. But, considering we did lose the game and we had so many decisions go, against us, we actually played really well. And, this is related to the player rankings because so many players performed really well. They came up to the occasion, and that's, resulted in quite a lot of players getting really good rankings. But like I say every week, if you do have any different opinions to me, or you just want to comment something about the game like I did in the other podcast, do drop a comment below this video so myself and other fans can hear what you thought of the game and who you thought the best player was. But obviously, we're going to start in goal, Wayne Hennessy, and like you heard in the introduction, Pardew made a lot of changes, Wayne Hennessy being one of them, coming in for Julian Speroni, and I'm going to give Wayne Hennessy a 7. Made one great save low down from Antonio Valencia in the first half and punched away a few high balls. Could do nothing about either goal. So Hennessy had a really, really good game. Now, he got a 7, and I don't know how to explain Hennessy's performance because he didn't actually have to do much during the game. But whenever he was called upon, like you said, the massive save he made against Valencia. Also, when the corners are coming, he done really well at punching them away, obviously where he's about 6'7", he's able to punch them away, clear them away, and he done it really well. But the thing is, I think that the whole team played well, but the defence especially, because they were managed to cope with the Man United attackers and therefore give Wayne Hennessy lots of protection. So, Wayne Hennessy didn't necessarily have to do much during the game, but, whenever he was called upon, he made some lovely good saves. And one of the saves he made was from Fellaini. Obviously, he was to the left of Hennessy. He's put it across goal. It's going to go in the left corner. And Hennessy jumps, makes a stretch, fingertip save. And obviously Ward cleared it. So, whenever Hennessy was called upon, he was able to make a save. And the 2 goals, we're not going to blame him about them because they were 2 very good, powerful strikes from Man United. But, a solid performance from Wayne Hennessy. And if we see more of this next season, he can be turning into a good player. And obviously he's going to the Euros with Wales. And, hopefully that can advance him, help him develop more as a player to be even more better in games. Now to move on to the fullback, Joe Ward. And this is a debatable one. Many people thought he had a slight off game. But I personally think he rose up to the occasion and put in a really solid performance. And for that reason, I am actually going to give Joe Ward a 7. Struggled against the pace of Anthony Martial at times and found himself dragged out of wide of position on more than one occasion. So, Joe Ward, we all know he isn't really the fastest player in the team. And obviously he is quite fast, but, he isn't, really fast player like the likes of Suarez. But, he did struggle a little bit to, contain Martial at times. And, that resulted in him being out of position. But whenever he was out of position, he was more central. So he's more of a central defender, so a centre-back, which I would rather him do. So when people say he was out of position, it doesn't necessarily mean he was bad, because he was drifting in just to add a little bit more support and guidance to the defence. And he'd done that with ease. And yes, he'd done it on a few occasions. But, whenever he'd done it, the likes of Balassi or Zaha would come back and defend and get that space which he left so that he can concentrate on central defending. But another thing to credit him for is, he was able to pass the ball forward on many occasions, supply the ball to Balassi. So when they had these runs, they were able to, be supplied. And, a classic example of that is when Joe Ward was making a run. He got tackled by a United player, but obviously the ball ended up rolling to Balassi, who was on the run. But Clattenburg, and I'm not really going to discuss about him because I've gone past that, but Clattenburg called it back, didn't play advantage, called it back for the free kick, when actually that pass, that roll from Ward could have resulted in Balassi making a run and scoring. But you know what? Joe Ward, a solid defensive performance, but also his attacking performance of supplying the ball was very good indeed. And that moves me on to Scott Dann, and I am going to give Scott Dann a 7. Kept Marcus Rashford fairly quiet, but suffered a foot injury at the end of normal time, forcing a reshuffle in the Palace back line. So, you know, Scott Dann, he is much slower than Joe Ward, but managed to contain Martial very well. So obviously, Scott Dann, he isn't a very fast player, but you know, he was able to stop Rashford, make these last ditch tackles to stop Rashford getting forward. And also, he was a very good aerial threat. Quite a lot of our players that are above sort of 6'4" are very good aerial threats, and Scott Dann's a classic example of that. Whenever United would whip in a corner, you know, Scott Dann, Joe Ward, Damien Delaney, Suarez, Jedinak, Wickham, they were all able to head the ball away, and Scott Dann, a prime example of that. You know, Marcus Rashford, a very good informed striker in my opinion at the minute, but Scott Dann was able to use his professionalism to keep him at bay, make sure he couldn't get through, and ultimately that resulted in us almost winning the cup, because it was a very solid performance from them. And you know what, he did get injured at at the end of normal time, and there are pictures of the after the game of him in crutches. But, you know, we've got the pre-season now in a month and a half, let's say. So he's got that time to recover, get back to full fitness. Unlike when he got injured earlier on in the season, it's in the middle of all the games and he missed about 4 games. Whereas now he's got this sort of month and a half to 2 months of a rest period, and hopefully that can help him, like it's done with the likes of Puncheon, help him to develop more, become stronger and an even better defender. But certainly, the time that Scott Dann was on the pitch, he was solid at the back. And that moves me nicely on to Damien Delaney, and I'm actually going to give Damien Delaney a 7. Got turned by Rashford early on, but learnt from it and played deeper to combat the teenager's pace. Was shoved up front late on in the hope of forcing an equaliser. So obviously, similar to Scott Dann, they're very like players, let's say, Scott Dann and Damien Delaney, but you know, they were able to contain Rashford, even though Delaney's even slower than Dann. But he was able to use his professionalism, like Dan, to, you know, defend the line. And with Damien Delaney, on a few occasions, he could have got off the penalty by making his last tackles. But by looking back at the replays, they were actually very good tackles because he cleanly won the ball. Yes, they went down, Rashford went down in the box. But, you know, Damien Delaney, he clearly won the ball by sliding into that tackle, getting the ball, clearing it out for a corner. And he'd done that so many times. He made so many tackles, so many blocks. And also, he was a good aerial threat. So, you know, it was a really solid performance from Damien Delaney and rightly deserves a 7. And just the final thing to sort of highlight about his performance, and this is the same every week, he's really vocal and commanding as usual, you know, commanding the backline, making sure they know their positions, and he done a superb job at Wembley, because I'm looking back at the game, every player knew their place in the team. And that moves me nicely on to the fellow fullback to Joe Ward, and that is Papa Suarez. And before I start with his description, Papa Suarez is a hot contender for the Man of the Match award. He was absolutely solid, and for that reason, I'm going to give a rare 8 to Papa Suarez, and I think he fully deserves it. But if you do think anything different, do comment below. But I think he was I think it's one of his best games for Palace. The Senegalese left-back got into plenty of blocks and looked defensively more solid. He also got forward on a few occasions, like he likes to do, offering decent support to Balassi. So like it said there, it's probably, in my opinion, other people may disagree with me, but I think this was his Papa Suarez's best game for Palace. He was really solid at the back. He was making crucial blocks, as well as heading the ball away from a loose corner. And also, you know, he was still able to be attacking. He was able to supply the ball, get the ball forward. And I think that really helped Balassi because, you know, teams have figured out our counter-attacking tactics now. So players are doubling up on Balassi. But what Suarez done, Suarez was able to do 1-2s with Balassi, try and get forward even more, and ultimately, you know, lead to something. And another thing to credit Papa Suarez for, obviously, when he's getting forward, he's using his pace to get forward. And when he's in the space, his crosses were superb. Yes, they didn't lead to anything throughout the game, but, you know, the fact that he's supplying the team with these chances is what we would want of a player of his ability. And that moves me nicely on to the captain and fellow defensive midfielder, Mile Jedinak. And like I said, similar to Damien Delaney, the captain was superb. He commanded the side very well. And for that reason, I am going to give Mile Jedinak a 7. Handed the role of marshalling Marouane Fellaini and did a good job, but lost to Belgium once. and that was enough for Fellaini to set up Mata's equaliser. So obviously the main role of sort of Jednak was to marshal Fellaini, and we all know that actually they are very similar players. Obviously, both Jednak and Fellaini are very physical players, very tall players. They've both got loads of hair. Fellaini with the afro and Mile Jednak with that beautiful beard. But other than that, they're very like-for-like players. Both players have got banned for elbows. They're both very physical players, and they're both a very good aerial threat. But Jednak dealt with him very well, and I think that's just because they clashed, really, because they were similar. But, you know, on the one occasion he did lose them, it was unfortunate that he led to Fellaini, but that was just a mix-up from the whole team, to be honest. So you can't really pinpoint that on Mile Jednak. But ultimately, yes, he could have done better with that opportunity, but throughout the whole game, the whole 120 minutes, he was solid and was able to deal with his main man, the main threat for United in the midfield, Fellaini. And like I said at the beginning, he was vocal, he was commanding, made sure all the players, forwards, backs, goalkeeper, all knew where their position was, and he was so emotional after the game. It meant so much to him, and it would have been so nice to see Jednak lift the trophy, as he's done with the playoff trophy, as he's done possibly in Australia. You know, he wanted to show that, and he showed so much passion after the game. He was one of the many players crying after the game, and that's what we want from our players. But ultimately, a very solid performance from Mile Jednak, and hopefully he can kick on next season. And that moves me nicely on to his fellow partner and defensive midfielder Yohan Cabaye, who had a slight off game. And this is not just in my opinion, this is just as a whole. And I think one of the reasons this is just because he's been playing injured. Similar to Henderson, for example, at Liverpool. He was superb at the beginning of the season, but had an injury. He's still playing with the injury, but he's gone downhill and may not be included in the England squad. And that's happened to Yohan Cabaye. He's had this injury and he's sort of plummeted. Not saying that he played bad, but, you know, he's slightly lost it, let's say, in the recent weeks. But, you know, credit him for what he done. And for that reason, I'm actually going to give Yohan Cabaye a 6. The Frenchman didn't have the sort of impact on the game we would have liked, and was taken off for Puncheon with 20 minutes to go of normal time. So like I said there, he was out of sorts. He wasn't really the best. He wasn't really the Cabaye we would know. And we didn't really see what we wanted to see from him. He was playing a more advanced role because McArthur and Jednak were defensive. And I don't think that suits Cabaye very well. Yes, he is playing injured, so you're not going to expect much from him. But certainly, I personally prefer him more defensive because he's good at making these last-ditch tackles, which he's done quite a lot. And also, he's very good at supplying the ball. And a thing to credit him for was one of his set pieces. He whipped the ball in from the Wickham disallowed goal free kick, whipped the ball in, got on the head of Balassi, and De Gea just managed to tip it over. So, you know, he was making good deliveries, but, you know, he didn't really have the best impact on the game we would have wanted. And talking about defensive midfielder, I personally would have preferred McArthur to play further forward because McArthur, he's got a little bit more pace than Cabaye, and also he can take players one-on-one because he gets the ball, he does a little spin to get past them, and also he's very good and accurate at passing. But, you know, not the best performance from Cabaye, but certainly, hopefully with this sort of pre-season / this sort of no-game holiday season, he can get back to full fitness and we can see the best of him next season. And now to move on to a defensive midfielder or attacking midfielder, depends which way you see him, but that is James McArthur, and I'm going to give this Scottish man a 7. Asked to play him a more advanced role and didn't seem to be able to have any influence, but that didn't stop him from working hard all over the pitch. Looked more comfortable when Puncheon was introduced and he was able to drop deeper. So like it said there, I've sort of highlighted it with Cabaye, but you know what, Cabaye, he started attacking, but obviously, as you can see, he's injured, he's not playing really well. So McArthur was dropped back, or he was dropped forward rather than being dropped back. And that superb, that worked to our advantage. Yes, he isn't really an attacking midfielder, and that's why he didn't have the best influence on the game, but he still worked really hard. His work rate is really high. So, you know, whenever he gets the ball, instead of sort of passing it, chickening it out, he would get the ball, keep possession, hold up the ball, try and make these lovely turns, try and get through people, weave past people, and ultimately, he done that throughout the whole game, and that was really good. You know, his work rate was superb. And obviously, when Puncheon came on, he looked a bit more confident. And I think that's just because Puncheon's passing ability is slightly better than Cabaye's at the moment. So obviously, we know Cabaye's got probably the best passer in the whole team. But at the present time, Puncheon's probably better because he can, you know, do 1-2s with McArthur. And ultimately, that led to McArthur feeling a bit more comfortable. And also, that meant he could drop a bit more deeper and have a more physical game where he would have to defend more as well as being able to supply the ball. But certainly a good performance from him. And now I'm going to move on to Wilfried Zaha. Obviously, come back from his injury, his buttocks injury. Don't know how that happened, but he's come back into the squad and he had a pretty decent game. And for that reason, I am actually going to give him a 7. Not his best game, although as expected, Manchester United doubled up on him at all times. As extra time wore on, he looked more likely to create a goal, but couldn't get anything on the deciding touch. So, it's not his best game for Palace, but certainly he like most of the players, he stood up to the event, he rose to the event and put in a very solid performance. And obviously, similar to Balassi, they know what to do now. They double up on him, and that meant he wasn't able to get forward very much. But he did use on multiple occasions his pace to advantage. He would get past players, but always, similar to Damien Delaney and Scott Dan, United made last-ditch tackles in the box, which meant that Wilfried Zaha couldn't cross the ball in. And notably, maybe, debatably, one of them tackles could have been a penalty. But, go and listen to part 1 if you want to hear about that. But to be honest, I'm not really going to worry about the penalties. I'm going to concentrate on actually the solid, passionate performances from the players. But, as the time wore on, most players were getting more tired. But where Zaha hasn't been playing for 2 or 3 weeks, he had a little bit more energy. So, he was the most likely person to create a chance. And he had a few shots on goal. One of them went just wide. Another one got deflected, I believe. So, he couldn't get that touch, but certainly he was able to create these chances and overall have a very solid performance. And that moves me on to Yannick Bolasie, and he's one of these other debatable ones in the team, but I'm going to give him credit where it's due because he probably, on the day, was one of the best attacking options and threats we had, and he did create numerous opportunities on goal, and some people may give him a 6, some people may give him a 7, and I'm not going to do half ratings in this podcast. But you know what? I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because he did have an alright game, and I am going to give him a 7. And he failed to have a real impact on the game and mostly found himself being forced back to cover defensively. Now that basically sums his game. He didn't really do much on the game. There was nothing notable about his performance. But, he didn't have the best impact because they were doubling up on him. But whenever he was able to get past or make a run, get past players, he was able to do it with ease because he used his pace. He cut inside a few times. He had a shot. It was destined for the bottom right corner just to squeeze in, but De Gea managed to a fingertip save it out. So, it weren't like he didn't have any opportunities. But, the very few opportunities he did have, he done very well. But obviously United were that bit better in stopping him from creating them. But certainly, when you're not very attacking and you're being doubled up on, you're going to have to be defensive. And he done that very well. Whenever Rashford or Martial were on the attack, Bolasie would use his pace to come back so he could defend it, rather than letting the likes of Ward, who is not that fast, deal with it. He would let Bolasie would get in there, get into the thick of the action defensively, and make sure that he could keep up with them. And he'd done that very well. But, there's nothing wrong with being defensive when you have to be. And people may say we parked the bus. I don't think we parked the bus as such. We did sit quite far back defensively, but the only reason we've done that is so we were able to contain the likes of Martial, Rashford and Rooney. And we've done that very well throughout the whole game. But, not the best performance from Yannick Bolasie, but certainly not a worse performance, but a very solid, I don't know how to say it, performance or just a solid shift, I suppose, because it wasn't the best performance as such, but, he put in a shift, he put in his effort, and you can see that after the game. And that moves me nicely on to the striker in the formation, and that is Connor Wickham. Obviously scored the winner in the semi-final to get us to the final, obviously scored a few crucial goals this season, and I'm actually going to give Connor Wickham a 7. A hard-working display up front, but was handed no real opportunities he could convert, replaced by Dwight Gale towards the end of normal time. So like I said there, similar to MacArthur, he's a very hard-working player, always running, always making these lovely runs, as well as holding the ball up for other players. And you know what? He was holding up the ball many occasions to get it wide so that other people could have an opportunity. But, the players didn't really pay him back because he didn't really get any other opportunities. Whenever he did get an opportunity, he was able to hit the goal or hit the ball with some powerful strikes. Obviously, none of them resulting in goals, but, he had these chances. Maybe if the likes of Bolasie and Zaha had even better games, and Suarez to an extent had even more better attacking games, maybe if they created these opportunities, Connor Wickham would have been able to convert them more. But, he was replaced by Dwight Gale towards the end of the game. That's nothing about his performance. That's only to keep up the fitness because, Wickham's one of these players prone and known for getting injured. But, he's come back, slowly introducing him back into the squad, and hopefully eventually he'll be able to do 90 minutes again. But he wasn't replaced by Gale because he had a bad game. It was just purely for fitness. But hard working display from him. Whenever he had an opportunity, he took it, although he didn't really get many opportunities, and maybe if he had more chances he would have had a better game. But that moves me nicely on to these substitutes, and I'm going to start with Jason Puncheon. Obviously scored the goal which could have made us win if Clattenburg had allowed the Wickham goal, which admittedly, non-biasedly, he should have allowed it because you play the advantage if the player gets up within a second. But no more of that. I'm going to stop moaning about that, but go to Pod 1 if you want to find out about that. But he turned the game after his introduction and scored a fantastic goal just 6 minutes after coming on. Palace instantly looked more of a threat going forward with him on the pitch. So like I've said, obviously with Cabaye playing and MacArthur playing and Jednak playing, them three players, they're both three defensive players. So that meant that either Cabaye or MacArthur had to go forward. And obviously that didn't really work well because none of them players are really fit for that purpose. But obviously when Jason Puncheon came on for Cabaye, he was the attacking threat. He was the attacking midfielder that we were missing throughout the game. So obviously that meant that the likes of MacArthur could go back and do a defensive job, and Jason Puncheon done the attacking job. And like I said, 6 minutes into him being on the pitch, he scored a fantastic goal. Obviously, he whipped in the corner, which was headed away, obviously by United. Joe Ward picked up on the edge of the area, crossed it into him. Jason Puncheon, being very aware and a very skillful player that he is, he was able to find himself onside in the right position, control the ball. So obviously, he had two touches, one to control the ball, another one just to shoot that powerful shot past De Gea. An absolutely superb goal, could have been crucial and could have won us the game. But no more on that. But as soon as he came on, he had an instant impact, the exact definition of super sub or impact sub. He came on and was by far the best threat on the pitch, the best attacking threat. And I think that's what we missed in the game. There was debate about whether to include MacArthur, Jednak, or even Cabaye, drop Cabaye. And obviously, Pardew decided to take Puncheon off. And yes, apparently Puncheon was a bit angry that he was left out. But to be honest, the amount of passion he showed when he scored that goal, and the amount of passion he showed to Palace throughout the years and through his youth, I don't think that's right. I think them stories are just scaremongering about that decision. But certainly, he came on the pitch, showed the passion, showed the determination to score a goal, and ultimately that led to him scoring a goal and having an overall good performance. And the final two substitutions were Dwight Gale and Adrian Mariappa. They didn't really have a huge impact on the game, so I'm going to give them both sixes. And there's nothing notable about their performances, but I'm going to give them both sixes. Doesn't mean they had a bad performance, but they weren't really on the pitch for that long to have a major impact. But Dwight Gale had an opportunity to restore the lead in the second half of extra time, but his shot was saved well by De Gea. Maybe if he hit that with more power, it could have gone in. And then Mariappa, he didn't really do much in the game. He still put in another solid performance defensively. Obviously, he replaced Scott Down, who was injured. But you know what? Didn't really have a huge impact on the game. But they are the player rankings for the FA Cup final against Manchester United. But like I said at the beginning, if you do have any different opinions to me, do comment them below so myself and other fans can see who you thought the best performance was against Manchester United. Now to move on to my Man of the Match. And before we start, I would just like to give my 4 nominations for the Man of the Match award. And then I will give you the results of my Twitter poll, as well as some of the results or other players who did miss out on this award, who I did put in a poll on Facebook. But, there was so many, most of the team were on that poll, so there's no really point giving you the results of that one. But start with the Twitter poll, and the 4 nominations are Papa Soare, Mile Jednak, obviously Jednak is what commentators call him, Jason Puncheon, and Connor Wickham. So in 4th place with 4% of the votes was Connor Wickham. In 3rd place with 19% of the votes was Jason Puncheon, scored the winning goal. Or sorry, not the winning goal, but scored the goal which could have won us the game. Which means in 2nd place with 37% of the votes was Mile Jednak. Which means the winner of the CPC podcast Man of the Match award for Man United in the FA Cup final was Papa Soiree with 40% of the votes. So well done to Papa Soiree. Obviously, you don't get a certificate or you don't get a trophy or anything, but you do get my sincere congratulations for a very solid performance. And before I go on to talk about who I thought the man of the match was, I'm actually going to give you the players that missed out. For example, Wayne Hennessy had a very solid game, made some decent saves and catches throughout the game. Joe Ward, although people thought he was very bad because he wasn't able to run and cope with Martial and Rashford, he was still able to be very good defensively, as well as being able to support and supply. Notably, another player who maybe had a good game was Wilfried Zaha. Obviously, our best attacking threat on the day. He was able to get the ball forward, had a few tame opportunities to score, maybe could have done better. And I think that's really it. To be honest, other people have said the fans. The fans were absolutely amazing. They were the best fans they've seen at New Wembley, and that's not coming from me. That's coming from many people and professionals. But, loads of players missed out. As a whole, it was actually a very solid game from all of the players. But obviously, you can only narrow it down to 4 players. And, what I've done this week, like I've done in most weeks recently, I've got one defender in Papa Soiree, got a defensive midfielder in Mile Jednak. Then, obviously, I've got Jason Puncheon as the attacking midfielder. And obviously, the striker, Connor Wickham. So, I've tried to balance it out between the different positions. But certainly, the whole team had a good performance. So, it was very hard to narrow it down to these guys. But I'm going to give you sort of 1-word reviews, 2-word reviews of the different players and why I thought they were the man of the match. Obviously, Papa Soiree was probably the best attacking threat on the day, but also was very good defensively at headering away and obviously making blocks. Obviously, Mile Jednak was captaining the side very well. He was able to be really good defensively and make loads of last-ditch tackles, and notably, he was very good in the air as well. Obviously, Jason Puncheon, I don't know where to start with him. It's just for the goal. That's it. If someone's scored a crucial goal in a final or in any game, the goal is crucial, and the goal was superb. So a goal for him, but also just his presence, his commandment to the attacking players on the field, and also just because he was the best attacking threat. And then obviously that moves me on to Connor Wickham. Obviously, out of the strikers, he was the best attacking option. Obviously, Wickham had a few opportunities he could have done better with, but his hold-up play was good as well, and just his overall attacking sense was really good as well. But obviously, it was a slightly hard decision to narrow it down to these players, and then once again to actually pick the players who I thought, or the player who I thought was the man of the match, was actually quite difficult, because obviously you would say Puncheon, give it to Puncheon because obviously he scored the goal, but then in my head I'm thinking, well, Papa Soiree had a really solid attacking and defensive performance, so obviously I've given you away there my 2 people who I thought the man of the match was, and it was a slightly easier decision than in past week. And I'm actually going to give it to Papa Soiree. So congratulations to Papa Soiree. Like I said, you don't win anything, but you do get, you get my congratulations because you were solid. And I think the main reason you got it more than most is obviously because you played the full 90 minutes. So you had the bigger impact on a bigger length of time, a longer length of time. But also just because you were the best defensive player probably the best defensive player by far, because you made so many blocks, so many tackles throughout the whole game. But also you were very good in the air. And also just because you were probably one of the best attacking options on the day, because you were able to make these runs, get crosses in, but also you were very good at supplying the ball. So there you have it. That's my podcast review. Now we're going to listen to what Pardew and a few players had to say after the game.
Yeah, I was really disappointed with the Connor decision in particular, because you could see he was going to get up first, and obviously the advantage was really with us. He actually had a free pass to Yala for a tap-in. Played on, still scored, and so to be pulled back, that was really harsh. And I do think that the Rooney tackle on Wilf was a penalty, but nevertheless there was enough in the first half to show that our tactical plan to stop them, get them through us, which we worked really well and hard on all week, worked for us. And the quick breaks, if we just had a little bit more assistance from the ref, we might have done better in the first half. Second half, I thought we were a lot better, a bit more composed with the ball. I thought it was a bit nervous when we started. But the players have given me everything today. They played with heart and passion. It was a great cup final. Manchester United did the same. And it was even in the tactical game plan that was being played out. They had more possession, trying to get through us, couldn't get through us, and us on the break. It was made for an enthralling tie and a game that could have gone either way. Unfortunately for us, it didn't go our way.
Obviously you never think you're over the line, but obviously scoring so late on, you must have been thinking, well, maybe.
Yeah, and I felt that we would be, if we took the lead at that stage, we would see it through the way we had defended. But Rooney comes up with a great moment. He draws 2 or 3 defenders to him. It just unbalances us a little bit, and he digs a cross out that that only perhaps he could have done. They score, they're back in it, and then the extra time period was a period that I felt we was in control really, apart from that little 2-minute spell where they scored. Carrick just got in, and then a wonder hit.
Disappointment with Mark Lampard?
No, not really, because he's given an honest performance. But I think not so much the penalty, because I think that's a tough decision. When you look at it on video, okay, Rooney doesn't play the ball, and it probably is a penalty, but in real time might have been difficult. But the Connor decision was a really tough one. But there's no, there's nothing in that other than he blew a little bit early. I can't chastise him for that. It was an honest mistake. For us, I'd just like to say that I thought Crystal Palace, the football club, handled themselves very, very well today. I thought our fans were terrific. They showed the world that when they fill the stadium, any stadium, they won't get outsung. We might not have 80, 90,000, but we got 40, and they make a real racket. They were brilliant today. I thought my players conducted themselves well, and we're trying to take the defeat with dignity, and we wish Man United well in Europa League when they're there next year. And thank you guys for your coverage, and we go home and lick our wounds. Thank you.
Well, Mile, commiserations. That was a game that really could have gone either way. Such tight margins, just that wonder strike, and suddenly United have the cup.
Yeah, unfortunate. Not any easier to take, wonder strike or not. I know a lot of players out there left a lot on that pitch, left everything on that pitch, and never easy to be on the losing side after a game like that. We were close, after scoring, but we knew we had to try and keep him out for that 5-minute period straight after we scored, and we didn't. They got themselves back in. Full credit to them for getting themselves back in, and getting that all-important second goal, which effectively won them the game. And it's congratulations to them, but I'm proud of my team, my teammates, and hopefully we can use it as a motivation going forward.
The manager did, echo those sentiments, that he's extremely proud of the effort you put in, said that you couldn't have done any more. Like something you can take from the situation, I guess, that you left everything out there.
Yeah, doesn't make it any easier though, that's for sure, because we were buoyed on by such a fantastic crowd. Would have been nice for them. They sung their hearts out today, and we came up short, and I don't think that that was their just reward. But that's football, and we still we have to try and take the positives. It's still a bit raw and fresh, and it still will be for a little time, but a lot of disappointed people in that changing room.
And just finally, a word on the fans. You mentioned it just then, but they were absolutely terrific today, weren't they?
Look, I think my admiration for the fans is they are the best fans in the country without a doubt. They showed up again and outsang the winning team by far. It's a shame that didn't win us the game, but I'm sure, like they always do, they come and sing and they support, and I urge them to do the same going forward, which I no doubt they will. But yeah, disappointing, because I had a lot of people in that crowd myself that I've got a lot of respect and admiration for, and not doing it for them is something that doesn't really sit well with me and is quite difficult.
Well, Joel, commiserations. You couldn't really have given much more today, and it was such a tight margin in the end, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It's obviously gutting, but I think we deserve something more. We had some great chances, and you know, it was a valiant effort. But it's the way it is sometimes.
Great finish from Jason. He did well when he came on, didn't he? What a strike to put you ahead.
Yeah, it's fantastic character from Punch. You know, obviously it's disappointing to be left out, but he done a tremendous job when he come on, and you know his finish was testament to that. And his character, the way he conducted himself, is fantastic.
The manager said that he was proud of the account you gave of yourselves. He said that the team couldn't have given any more. You left everything out there, so no regrets about it. Just one of those days, I guess.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you know, on another day, maybe we come away with the trophy. We gave it everything. We left it out there, and you know, that's all I think we can do. You know, the fans were fantastic.
I was just going to say a final word on the fans. They were amazing, weren't they?
Yeah, they were amazing. You know, there's not quite like there's not an atmosphere like it. You know, when you walk out there, your hair stand up on the back of your neck with the noise and the occasion, and our fans right the way through, even at the end with the disappointment of losing. Our fans, you know, showed their support, and they lifted our spirits.
So there, now you've heard what Pardew and a few players had to say. That concludes my match review of Crystal Palace versus Manchester United in the FA Cup final at Wembley. And at this point, I would say come back next week for my review and preview of the next game. But obviously, it's pre-season time, it's holiday time. We've got 1.5 months of no football, so boo-hoo. But, you know, there'll be no podcast, but hopefully I'll try and do some extra podcasts so we can all keep up to date with all the Palace news. But, you know, thanks for watching this video. And just remember, in the meantime, to keep up the Palace.
I